Good morning, Class 6 pupils, and welcome to a new day, that is Thursday, date 21st May 2020, a time that we should be in class dealing with our second term, but we've been forced to be away from the school because of the happenings in this world, and I want to once again remind all of us to wash our hands, stay safe in our homes, avoid gatherings, and ensure that we use the masks as recommended by the Ministry of Health and as guided by WHO. This morning we want to deal with economic resources and economic activities. And economics and resources and economic activities have a great meaning in what you and I do every other day. I need to remind us, today we will be dealing with agriculture. And we are told most of Kenya depends on agriculture for its income, employment, feeding, and so many other things that are there. The objectives for the day: number one, we will state conditions for growth of crops that we'll be discussing. We'll identify areas where these crops are grown, and by the end of the same session, we'll be able to state contribution of cash crops to the economy. Getting into the lesson, what is agriculture? I want to start by saying agriculture is growing of crops and keeping of livestock. When you grow livestock, when you grow bananas, when you grow coffee, when you grow maize, that is agriculture. In agriculture, we have subsistence farming. Subsistence farming simply means growing crops for family use. If you keep one cow for the milk of the family, that is subsistence farming. If you keep 5 chickens for eggs in the home, it is subsistence farming. Cash crop farming. This is growing crops for sale. It could be, you may decide to grow the same maize, but this one in particular for selling. That is a cash crop. Specifically today we're going to deal with coffee growing, and coffee is sweet for our beverages. We are told you need to take breakfast in the morning. It can be tea, coffee, cocoa, but I know kids love a lot of chocolate. But let's deal with coffee this time around, the growing of coffee in Eastern Africa. And we say the Eastern African countries, most of them grow coffee, including our own country, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. We will deal with coffee growing in Kenya and Ethiopia. If you go to those two countries, you're going to find two common types. The varieties include Arabica coffee and Robusta coffee. But what makes it growing of Arabica and Robusta here in Kenya and not in Sudan, not in Somalia, the other Eastern African countries? That gives rise to what we call the conditions that support coffee growing. What conditions do we require? Number one is that most of this coffee grows in highland areas. And when we come to talk about growing, we look at 4 factors. Number one, we look at the soils, because crops grow on soils. Number 2, we look at the temperatures. Temperatures, rainfall, they form part of the climate of a place. And then we look at the altitude, or what we call the height above sea level. So The best temperatures for growing of coffee, therefore, are cool, wet climates. The temperatures need to be cool. And we average between 15 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. This requires that you always wearing warm clothes in such areas. The climate must also be frost-free. Then we require reliable rainfalls that are well distributed in a year to an average of 1,000 to 1,500 millimeters. The height above sea level must be above 1,500 meters to a maximum of 1,800 meters. What about the soils? The soils are supposed to be red, deep, volcanic soils. Red volcanic soils which must be well drained. In other words, they don't retain a lot of water. Well drained. They allow water to flow out. And I need to insist here and say Robusta coffee, unlike Arabica, will do better in hot, wet climate. In hot, wet climate and areas that are lower than Arabica. I want to believe that tells us why we have been visiting Kiambu in the last trip we had, and you can remember tea and coffee growing around those Kiambu areas that we went. So, which areas then does farmers grow coffee in Kenya? To begin with Kenya, we have Kiambu County, where coffee is grown both in small scale, that is farmers and their small pieces of land, and large scale. We also have Murang'a County, Meru County, and Nyeri County. Boys and girls, Robusta coffee is found in Busia and Siaya, while this same coffee is grown in Ethiopian region of Kaffa and Harar. Let's note that Ethiopia is the largest coffee producer in Africa, and it is placed number 5 in the world. Of course, number 1 has been Brazil for a long, long time. The Ethiopian highlands is the area where you find the Kaffa and Harar regions. So where do people grow coffee? Coffee is grown because it has some great importances. One of them being that when coffee is grown, it is sold to foreign countries, and Kenya, Ethiopia, and other countries earn foreign exchange. Coffee also helps to create employment. People who work in factories, people who pick coffee, they all get jobs based in this industry of growing coffee. Coffee is good for beverage. Cappuccinos and others that we find in the cafes. We have support for the growing of other industries. Industries that deal with pesticides that are used in the farming of coffee, they depend on coffee factories. Even roads to these areas where coffee is grown, they develop because there is something happening in the coffee growing areas. That is growth of other industries. Coffee trees, when they are old, they are used for fuel as well as charcoal. We have husks. When we take coffee to the berries to the factory, the husks that are gotten from these berries are useful as manures. However, we have challenges, and these are the problems that face coffee growing. Number 1, consistent changes in weather. Weather has become unpredictable, and there are times we find we have prolonged drought or too much rainfall, and this affects growing of coffee. We also have changes in the world prices of coffee. Sometimes the prices are high, other times are low. That we call it fluctuation of prices. And this has continued to bring a lot of problems because it's either up today, tomorrow low, and farmers are not happy. Then there is overused soil nutrients. The coffee farm is still there and people are using traditional methods of farming. Very few people are ready to go into research on how they can use technology to promote coffee farming. This brings me to the end, and I would like to remind us very quickly that we've looked at the objectives of coffee growing or the cash crop growing, and in particular today we have dealt with coffee growing in Kenya and Ethiopia, and we have realized for coffee to do well we need temperatures, rainfall that is reliable throughout the year, cool temperatures, a very high altitude, not very high but a high altitude, and soils that are well drained. We've also found some counties within the Mount Kenya region are very rich in growing coffee, just like the growing of coffee in the Abyssinian or Ethiopian highlands. We also looked at the importance of coffee to the society, to the country, and to a farmer as an individual, because farmers make or earn income through coffee growing. Besides, we have also tackled the problems that face coffee growing. Next lesson, as we prepare, we'll be dealing with maize growing in Kenya and Tanzania. Thank you very much. Stay safe and abide as is requested by the Ministry of Health.